The atmosphere inside the executive offices of Forrester Creations has been nothing short of a suffocating pressure cooker in recent weeks. Steffy Forrester Finnegan, the reigning co-CEO, has been fighting a multi-front war to maintain her grip on the company her grandfather built. The relentless corporate warfare, compounded by the deeply personal betrayals from those she trusted most, has been quietly extracting a devastating physiological toll on her body. For weeks, Steffy has been the immovable object standing against the unstoppable force of Logan ambition, but even the strongest fortresses possess structural limits. The relentless barrage of confrontations with Brooke Logan Forrester, coupled with the agonizing betrayal of her own father, Ridge Forrester, has pushed Steffy to the absolute precipice of human endurance. The foundation of Steffy's world began to crumble the moment Ridge walked into her office and dropped the catastrophic bombshell that Brooke was actively gunning for her co-CEO seat. For Steffy, this was not merely a corporate restructuring, it was a profound, deeply personal betrayal. Ridge, the man who was supposed to protect her legacy, had essentially asked her to step aside to appease his wife. The volcanic fury that erupted from Steffy was a testament to her fierce dedication, but beneath that unyielding armor, her nervous system was fraying. She mounted an uncompromising defense of her throne, demanding that Brooke back down, but the sheer emotional velocity required to fight her own father and her stepmother simultaneously was quietly draining her life force. This toxic cocktail of betrayal, exhaustion, and relentless pressure finally reached its boiling point during a catastrophic confrontation with Hope Logan Spencer. Hope, who had been radically transformed by her own disillusionment and the repeated pausing of her hope for the future line, marched into Steffy's office with the righteous indignation of a woman who felt she had nothing left to lose. The argument over the HFTF line was not just about fashion. It was a proxy war for the soul of Forrester Creations. Hope, emboldened by Brooke's impending power play, unleashed a torrent of accusations, challenging Steffy's leadership, her vision, and her fundamental right to rule the company. Steffy, running on adrenaline and sheer stubbornness, met Hope's fury with her trademark condescension. She stood her ground, her voice dripping with authority, determined to put Hope in her place once and for all. But as the decibel level in the room rose, a silent, terrifying physiological event was unfolding inside Steffy's brain. The extreme, unmitigated stress that had been compounding for weeks finally triggered a catastrophic failure. Mid-sentence, the sharp, authoritative edge in Steffy's voice suddenly slurred. Her vision blurred into a chaotic mosaic of light and shadow, and the undeniable sensation of vertigo violently pulled her toward the floor. The moment Steffy collapsed, the entire dynamic of Forrester Creations fractured. The image of the indomitable Steffy Forrester Finnegan crumbling to the carpet sent a shockwave of pure, unadulterated terror through the building. Hope, whose anger instantly evaporated into sheer panic, screamed for help as the reality of the situation set in. The chaotic blur of paramedics, the wailing sirens of the ambulance cutting through the Los Angeles traffic, and the sterile, terrifying lights of the emergency room painted a grim portrait of the cost of corporate ambition. The fashion dynasty had pushed its reigning queen to the brink of death. Inside the stark, unforgiving environment of the hospital, the Forrester family gathered in a state of paralyzed shock. The doctors delivered a diagnosis that chilled Ridge to his very core. Steffy had suffered a transient ischemic attack, commonly known as a mini-stroke, directly induced by extreme, prolonged stress and physical exhaustion. The medical professionals warned that her body had simply shut down in self-defense, unable to process the toxic levels of cortisol and adrenaline pumping through her veins. The diagnosis hung in the air like a physical weight, a damning indictment of the environment that had been cultivated at Forrester Creations. For Ridge Forrester, the hospital waiting room became a purgatory of unimaginable guilt. Sitting beside the sterile white bed, watching his brilliant, fiercely independent daughter hooked up to a symphony of beeping monitors, Ridge was forced to confront the devastating consequences of his own passivity. The prophetic warnings delivered by Carter Walton echoed in his mind with agonizing clarity. Ridge realized, with crushing certainty, that his willingness to entertain Brooke's hostile takeover, his failure to protect his daughter's position, and his insistence on playing the middleman had literally pushed Steffy to the edge of a fatal stroke. The paternal failure, he felt, was absolute and suffocating. In that quiet, desperate moment of reflection, Ridge made an immediate, unilateral decision. The corporate maneuvering, the Logan ambition, the appeasement of his wife, all of it meant absolutely nothing in the face of his daughter's mortality. Overwhelmed by a profound sense of remorse, Ridge mentally revoked the demotion. He silently vowed that if Steffy woke up, if she recovered from this terrifying ordeal, the co-CEO's seat would be hers without question. He was prepared to beg for her forgiveness, to offer her the company on a silver platter, anything to undo the damage his betrayal had caused. However, when Steffy finally opened her eyes, the woman who emerged from the fog of unconsciousness was not the fragile, broken victim Ridge had prepared himself to comfort. The mini-stroke had not weakened her resolve, it had crystallized it. As the haze cleared, Steffy's mind began to process the events that led her to this hospital bed. She recognized the profound vulnerability of her situation, but instead of succumbing to it, her survival instincts kicked into overdrive. She looked at her father, seeing the agonizing guilt etched into every line of his face, and in that split second, Steffy realized she had been handed the ultimate weapon. The metamorphosis of Steffy Forrester Finnegan in that hospital room was nothing short of Machiavellian brilliance. She did not wake up seeking comfort. She woke up seeking absolute annihilation. The cold, calculating glint that settled into her eyes signaled a terrifying shift in the power dynamic. Steffy understood that her physical collapse was the undeniable proof of the toxic environment Brooke and Hope had created. Her weakness was no longer a liability, it was an impenetrable shield and a devastating sword. She was about to execute a political checkmate that would change the landscape of her family's empire forever. Speaking with a voice that was quiet but laced with an undeniable, terrifying authority, Steffy delivered her ultimatum. She did not ask for her job back. She demanded a total purge. Looking directly into Ridge's tear-filled eyes, Steffy weaponized her own mortality. She told her father that she could not, and would not, return to an environment that was actively trying to kill her. She framed the situation not as a corporate dispute, but as a matter of life and death. If Ridge truly loved her, if he truly felt the remorse that was written all over his face, there was only one acceptable course of action. Steffy demanded that Ridge permanently terminate Brooke and Hope from Forrester Creations. She laid out the terms with chilling precision. The Logans were a cancer to her well-being, and their relentless ambition had literally triggered a stroke. She forced Ridge into an impossible, agonizing corner. He had to choose between the life and health of his daughter and the careers of his wife and stepdaughter. By using her medical crisis as the ultimate leverage, Steffy ensured that any attempt by Brooke or Hope to defend themselves would be viewed as monstrous and insensitive to a stroke victim. The sheer ruthlessness of Steffy's maneuver echoed the legendary tactics of her namesake, the late Stephanie Forrester. Stephanie was a master of utilizing her health, her heart attacks, and her physical vulnerabilities to manipulate the men in her life and banish the Logans from her kingdom. In this moment, Steffy fully inherited that legacy. She stripped away the pretense of fair corporate competition and reduced the battlefield to a primal, emotional hostage situation. She knew that Ridge, drowning in his own guilt, possessed neither the emotional fortitude nor the moral high ground to deny a daughter who had almost died because of his actions. This ultimatum places Ridge in the most devastating predicament of his entire life. To comply with Steffy's demands means initiating a brutal, unforgiving severing of ties with Brooke and Hope. It means walking into the executive offices and firing his wife, the woman he has spent a lifetime loving, and banishing Hope, effectively destroying the hope for the future line permanently. The fallout from such a decision would not only fracture his marriage beyond repair but would ignite a blood feud between the Forresters and the Logans that would make their past conflicts look like child's play. Yet, to deny Steffy's demands is equally unthinkable. How can a father look at his daughter, recovering from a stress-induced brain injury, and tell her that he values his wife's corporate ambition over her physical survival? Steffy has brilliantly engineered a scenario where Ridge's historical passivity is no longer an option. He cannot straddle the fence. He cannot appease both sides. He must make a definitive, brutal choice. Steffy's cold calculation ensures that Ridge will be the one to pull the trigger, allowing her to keep her hands clean while she recovers her strength. Meanwhile, the impending doom hanging over Brooke and Hope is palpable. Brooke, who had been prematurely celebrating her imminent ascension to the co-CEO throne, will find herself entirely blindsided by this catastrophic turn of events. The narrative will violently shift against them. They will no longer be the righteous underdogs fighting for their creative freedom. They will be painted as the ruthless aggressors who pushed a young mother to the brink of a stroke. Steffy's medical emergency provides the perfect, unassailable public relations cover for their termination. The board of directors, the public, and the media will overwhelmingly side with the recovering executive over the ambitious stepmother. Hope Logan Spencer, who had radicalized her approach and pushed her mother into this hostile takeover, will have to face the terrifying reality that her actions have resulted in total ruin. The very line she fought so desperately to save, hope for the future, is now on the chopping block, not because of budget cuts, but because its existence is deemed a lethal threat to the CEO's health. The psychological devastation for Hope will be immense. She played the game of corporate thrones with absolute ruthlessness, but she failed to anticipate that Steffy would rewrite the rules of engagement from a hospital bed. As Steffy lies in her recovery room, surrounded by the sterile hum of medical equipment, she has never been more powerful. She has transformed her darkest, most vulnerable moment into the ultimate strategic triumph. By weaponizing her own physiological breaking point, she has effectively neutralized her enemies, secured her absolute authority over Forrester Creations, and bound her father to her will through the unbreakable chains of guilt. The Logan women are about to learn a devastating lesson. You can fight a CEO in the boardroom, but you cannot fight a martyr in a hospital bed. The coming weeks will undoubtedly showcase the brutal execution of Steffy's demands. Viewers will watch with bated breath as Ridge is forced to carry out the ultimate betrayal against his wife to save his daughter. The tears, the screaming matches, and the shattering of the Forrester-Logan blended family will provide unparalleled dramatic tension. Steffy Forrester Finnegan has proven that she is not just a survivor. She is an apex predator who knows exactly how to turn a moment of fatal weakness into an era of undisputed dominance. The reign of the Logans at Forrester Creations is facing an abrupt, ruthless execution, all orchestrated by a woman who realized that sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to let your enemies think they have broken you. For weeks, fear had followed Dylan like a shadow she could never outrun. Every phone call made her flinch. Every unfamiliar face on the street felt like a warning. Remy had woven himself into her life so completely that even silence no longer felt safe. He knew too much, controlled too much, and worst of all, he enjoyed watching her panic. But somewhere beneath the exhaustion and terror, something inside Dylan finally hardened into resolve. She realized she could not spend the rest of her life waiting for the next threat, the next manipulation, or the next disaster he planned to unleash. Fear was exactly what Remy wanted from her, and she refused to give him that victory any longer. Late one evening, hidden behind the closed doors of Liam's office, Dylan finally confessed everything she had been holding back. Her hands trembled as she spoke, but her voice never completely broke. Liam listened in stunned silence while she described Remy's threats, his obsession, and the dangerous game he had been playing around the Forresters. The more Liam heard, the angrier he became. Remy was no longer just a nuisance or a desperate opportunist. He had become a real danger to everyone connected to Steffy and the company. At first, Liam refused to let Dylan involve herself any further. He wanted to go directly to the police and end it immediately. But Dylan knew Remy too well. If they moved too soon, he would disappear, taking every secret with him. Worse, he would come back even more dangerous than before. No, if they wanted the truth, they needed Remy to believe he was winning. That was how the trap began. Dylan contacted Remy the next morning with a calmness that even shocked herself. She told him she had thought carefully about his demands and finally understood she had no choice. If handing over the confidential documents would make him leave her alone, then she would do it. Remy immediately sensed surrender in her voice, and it fed his ego exactly as she expected. He agreed to meet at the Forrester Gallery after hours, insisting the exchange happen privately. The moment she ended the call, Dylan nearly collapsed from the pressure crushing her chest. Liam caught her before she lost balance completely. He could see the terror in her eyes, but he could also see something else now: determination. For the first time in weeks, Dylan was no longer running. She was fighting back. By the time night fell over Los Angeles, the gallery had transformed into the center of a silent war. Police officers waited hidden in the shadows beyond the main exhibition hall. Liam coordinated carefully with Detective Baker while Ridge, Steffy, and several members of the Forrester family remained nearby despite repeated warnings to stay away. None of them trusted Remy to act rationally once cornered. The gallery itself looked almost haunting in the dim light. Massive portraits stared down from the walls like silent witnesses preparing for tragedy. Every echo of footsteps sounded unnaturally loud. Dylan stood alone near the center table, clutching a folder that appeared to contain the stolen documents. In reality, the papers were meaningless. The real objective tonight was Remy himself. When the doors finally opened, the temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly. Remy entered slowly, cautious but confident. His sharp eyes moved across the gallery, studying every detail. For a moment, Dylan feared he already knew. But then he smiled, that cold, arrogant smile she had come to despise. "You finally made the smart choice," he told her softly. Dylan forced herself not to step backward. "I just want this over." Remy approached the table, but something shifted in his expression almost immediately. His instincts began screaming at him. The silence felt wrong. The room felt too controlled. Then, from somewhere behind the walls of the gallery, came the faint sound of movement. Remy froze. Within seconds, police officers emerged from every direction. Liam stepped forward beside Detective Baker while Ridge positioned himself protectively near Steffy. The illusion shattered instantly. "It's over, Remy," Baker announced firmly. "Don't make this worse." For one brief moment, pure panic flashed across Remy's face. Then it transformed into fury. His eyes locked onto Dylan with absolute hatred. "You set me up." Dylan's pulse thundered painfully in her ears, but she stood her ground. "You did this to yourself." The room exploded into chaos. Remy attempted to flee toward the side exit, only to find officers already blocking the path. He shouted, cursed, and struggled violently as police restrained him. Yet even while handcuffed, there was something disturbingly calm beneath his rage, as though he still possessed one final weapon. Then he laughed. The sound echoed through the gallery so sharply that everyone fell silent. "You people really think this ends with me?" Remy sneered. "I was hired. I didn't start this war." The confession hit the room like shattered glass. Steffi stared at him in disbelief while Ridge demanded answers. Liam's expression darkened instantly. Even Baker looked caught off guard. Remy slowly turned his gaze toward Brooke and Katie, who had arrived moments earlier after hearing the police operation was underway. "You want the truth?" Remy said coldly. "Someone from the Logan family wanted Steffi destroyed. I was just the tool." The silence afterward felt unbearable. Brooke's face drained of color as she looked toward Katie, confusion and horror colliding in her eyes. Katie immediately denied everything, but uncertainty had already entered the room like poison. The damage was done. Every glance suddenly carried suspicion. Every past disagreement now seemed darker, more dangerous. Remy smiled again, satisfied with the destruction spreading around him. "You people destroy each other better than I ever could." Brooke stepped toward her sister, visibly shaken. "Katie, tell me he's lying." Katie's voice cracked under the pressure. "I didn't do this." But hesitation, even the smallest hesitation, was enough to deepen the wound between them. Years of loyalty, family history, and painful sacrifices suddenly stood on fragile ground. Brooke wanted desperately to believe her sister, yet Remy's accusation reopened old tensions neither woman had ever fully escaped. Their complicated history with the Forresters, their endless conflicts over loyalty and betrayal, all of it came rushing back with brutal force. Steffy watched the confrontation unfold with cold disbelief. Part of her wanted to dismiss Remy's words entirely, but another part could not ignore how calculated the entire scheme had been from the beginning. Someone with personal knowledge of the family clearly had been manipulating events behind the scenes. As officers dragged Remy toward the exit, he turned back one final time. "This city is built on secrets," he warned. "And the truth always destroys families faster than lies." Then he was gone. But his words remained. Long after the police cars disappeared into the Los Angeles night, nobody in the gallery moved. The danger Remy represented might have been contained, yet the emotional devastation he left behind had only begun. Brooke and Katie stood on opposite sides of the room, separated by more than distance. Liam remained beside Dylan, sensing her relief, but also the crushing guilt she carried for helping unleash truths that might destroy multiple families. Outside, the city lights of Los Angeles glittered with deceptive beauty, hiding the storm now growing beneath the surface. Trust had been shattered. Old rivalries were awakening again. And somewhere within the Logan family, a terrifying possibility